So there are a couple of ways to qualify. Really, there are two ways to qualify with kind of some subcategories under that. The easiest way is based on gross receipts. If you're looking at 2020 versus 2021, the answer to that is different. And so when we look at 2020, the way the law is written, if you experienced a greater than 50% decline in your gross receipts compared to the same quarter of the previous year, so we'd be comparing it to 2019 because that was our last so-called normal year. So when we talk about comparing things with this credit overall, we're always looking back to 2019. And so a greater than 50% decline in gross receipts quarter by quarter for 2020, you meet eligibility, you're an eligible employer. For 2021, that was changed to be the definition of a significant decline in gross receipts was changed to be 20%. And so I think, again, that's another reason why we're seeing a lot of these business owners say, hey, I didn't qualify in 2020, but I definitely qualify in 2021 because, I had that greater than 20% decline in gross receipts. And so that, to be eligible that way, I say it's the easiest way to qualify because it's simply a math exercise. And so we look at the gross receipts, we do the comparison. For 2020, again, we're comparing to the same quarter in 2019. And for the 2021 quarters, again, comparing to 2019 because that was the last normal year.
And I think it's important to point out that there is that distinction in 2020 versus 21, and that, again, was Congress's intent. Like, they wrote it differently for the reasons that they wanted it to impact more businesses, reward them for maintaining their payroll and maintaining their staff during the pandemic. So again, they wrote it differently. They changed it for each tax year because of the continued impacts we saw from the pandemic. I think another important thing that taxpayers aren't always thinking about, but again, how do I qualify? Do I qualify? When you're thinking about your company and how it's organized, not all taxpayers are calendar year taxpayers. So I have had several clients who are actually a fiscal year taxpayer, meaning that their year ends, September 30th, for example, and so, or, October 31st. And so they're, in their head, their quarters are on a fiscal basis. Every taxpayer is treated the same for the purpose of this credit, and all of them are based on calendar years. So when we request things like your financials on a monthly basis, sometimes that is because we want to make sure we're doing that calendar year analysis and adjusting for any fiscal year company. We always want to look at it on a calendar year basis.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so the other way to qualify is to show that you experienced a partial or full business suspension due to governmental orders. And so when we say governmental orders, we're really talking about the state, local, county governmental orders that impacted your business.
I was going to say, Ashley, not just impacted, but it was a mandate too that required you to maybe change your operations, close your doors. It impacted your business. So I like to point that out too, is that there's sometimes those suggestions in those governmental orders or just happenstance supply and demand changes. But the real, meat of that is that it was mandated. It was a requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point because I've had some clients say, well, we followed CDC guidelines, which of course as a business owner you should do. But absent that government mandate where you were required to do something such as close your in-person dining if you're a restaurant, something like that, absent that, mere guidance is not enough. And so the other thing I like to point out when we're talking about eligibility due to governmental orders is I've had business owners be surprised that they qualify because they did not completely shut down. They were not required to completely shut down. You can still qualify based on a partial business suspension. If some of your operations were suspended or if you experienced a more than nominal impact to operations due to modifications from these governmental orders, such as spacing requirements, capacity limitations. You could only let in so many customers at a time or so many employees in one area at a time. You think of manufacturing, for example. A lot of manufacturers were deemed essential by these government orders, depending on the type of manufacturing, but in general, manufacturing was typically essential. They still can qualify, and I've seen them qualify because they had to make certain changes to their operations in order to meet the requirements of a government order, such as spacing, capacity limitations, staggering shifts, reducing operating hours so that they could sanitize and clean, their locations so that it was safe for employees. Again, all tying that back to a specific governmental order, government mandate where they were required to do that in order to operate.